Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Oh, welcome everybody to Fantasy Football Tonight. I'm your host, Todd the True Guru Farino, and of course I will be joined shortly by my co-host, Mr. RC Rizza. I will get the chat room open also for you people in the chat room land. Forgot about that, so I'm going to get that going right now. Before we get the show going, I want to give a shout-out to, of course, fantasyfootballfetch.com, one of my sites. I'd like you guys to go visit it, please, if you get a chance to. And, of course, check out the great content we have on it, along with rate your favorite sites. Let the people out there know about a service you use on a site. Hey, if it's good or bad, let them know. Leave a review about it. We give 3 weekly prizes away. Monthly. My bad. 3 $50 monthly prizes away for if you leave one review, you go into the canister. If you win, you win. Check it out. Tonight's show, we were planning on doing focus on NFL teams. We are going to finish the AFC East. We're going to start off with the Dolphins. We're going to open the show up as soon as RC gets in here with the AFC East. And then we're going to plan on going into the NFC East, but we might hold that off because RC had a expert draft this weekend, and it's pretty impressive the way it went. So we're going to check it out. It's actually it's Fantasy Football Pros versus the Joes League. So you got some regular people in there, and then you have some of the expert guys in there, handling it all, getting it done for you. Go ahead. Give me one sec here. All right, we got everything going. All right, so if you haven't heard, we got some news. There's training camps, of course, wide open. Everything's getting going. And as I told you last week, I said, don't put a whole lot of, don't put a whole lot into the current ADP. I mean, when we're giving you analysis at the time, we're giving you the analysis for what we know it for. The ADP may change, may not change, but the whole point is that once training camp opens, once you start seeing some of these rookies perform, once you start seeing some of these veterans perform, certainly, and especially once we get into the preseason games, which we should be getting into pretty soon here, you're going to see things kind of develop, things kind of change, and it's certainly going to change ADP. Now, it might not change the very top. I'm not going to say it's going to change the very top. I mean, as expected and as always, you're going to see, basically the first 3 guys in every draft are going to be Ray Rice, Arian Foster, LaShawn McCoy, and depending on your league type and your rules and all that great information, it's going to depend on whether or not it's going to actually be one of those, which one it's going to be. My opinion, it should be Ray Rice. Others' opinions, it should be Arian Foster. I don't think anybody believes they should go with LaShawn McCoy first, but who knows? But anyways, we'll get more into that talk. Let me go ahead and see if we got RC. We do have RC, so we can go ahead and get the show started. How are you doing, RC?
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, nothing but the rent. Just trying to get out of baseball. I tried to phase myself out of baseball, but then, the Red Sox go out and have a good week, so then I got to start paying attention to them again. So, but so far, so good. I'm pretty much getting out of it. But we got this draft you had. So before we get into our final NFL team, and we're going to go into some draft talk, why don't you give them a little teaser? This draft was a pros versus Joes style draft, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it looks like you ended up with a pretty good team. Are you pretty happy with your team?
Yeah, but then again, I've done this for a couple of years, and every year I'm happy with my team, and it's one of those leagues where you can't touch the team after you draft them. So if you screw up on the rookies that you pick, then like last year. And I'm usually like a year early with rookies. Like last year I picked John Baldwin. Of course, he was just basically dead weight the entire season, of course, because he didn't do much of anything. I think I had Golden Tate, and of course he didn't do anything. So got Golden Tate again this year, so I'm happy about that. I think he's actually going to actually make some waves. But yeah, have you ever been in one of those leagues where you can't mess with the roster after you draft it? So it's just kind of frozen from that time that you draft.
No, I've never actually played in that kind of a league. I mean, I've played in that kind of a league baseball-wise, but never football-wise. So, but let's get into that a little bit more in a second. Let's go ahead and finish off with the Dolphins from last week, so we can say we And this should be a pretty easy one because there's not a whole lot to talk about on the Dolphins. And then we're going to get right into your draft. And I see you had, by the way, just let people know ahead of time, you had the number 2 draft pick, which is, in my opinion, I guess an okay pick. But, I mean, you got a long wait. So we'll see what you did with the second round. We got a feeling what you did with the first round. But anyway, so let's go ahead and let's finish off the eighth. We promised everybody, we know we have lots of Dolphin fans out there, RC. Millions of Dolphin fans. They cover the country. We would upset every single one of them if we didn't cover the Dolphins. So we're going to keep our promise and cover the Dolphins in the mighty offense led by Matt Moore, with David Garrard, of course, in there, and all sorts of great rookies that they have. So let's go ahead and start off at the quarterback spot. Is there a quarterback controversy in Miami right now?
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got basically a three-way competition between Gerard, Matt Moore, and Ryan Tannehill. And right now it looks like David Gerard has the early nod, and that's mostly because of he's just a marginally better talent than perhaps Matt Moore. And, of course, both these guys have a lot more experience than Ryan Tannehill. I would tend to think that Ryan Tannehill is actually a pretty good pro prospect. At the quarterback position, it's going to take a little time to actually learn the ropes, but I think he's going to at some point emerge as the choice there. David Gerard, as we've seen, I think he had some pretty bright years with the Jaguars but he really didn't ascend past the point, for what he is, and that's really just an average guy who can manage a game. He's not going to do anything special. In his younger years, I think he had, fairly good scrambling ability, but, and maybe it's unfair because he didn't have great teams to work with, really, but I really can't see. He might start off the season. As far as fantasy, if you want to take a chance with him as your number 3 quarterback, that's fine. I don't think he's really being drafted with really that much frequency this year. Maybe for 2 quarterback leagues, he becomes viable, but really the guy that you want to, at the quarterback position for the Dolphins to focus on, and this is really just for dynasty leagues, is Tannehill, I think.
So for this year, though, who do you like the best right now, at least for this year?
Even this year, if I had to pick one of these guys, it'd be Tannehill. I think, this is a guy, he's actually a converted wide receiver, so he's very mobile. He throws pretty good on the run. He has a very good arm strength. He can make all the throws he needs to. He's pretty advanced at reading defenses. That's of course one area for a young quarterback where he's going to need a little more seasoning. But he really does seem like a very good pro prospect. I really think it's a matter of time before he's the guy that will ascend to the top. Now, even if he does, this is really a situation where you probably just want to steer clear of anyway, because when you look at the wide receiver assortment they got there, notwithstanding the talk that Chad Johnson is, experiencing a resurgence and he's, really focused this year and he's playing hard, he might look actually pretty good when you compare him against, this motley crew that the Dolphins really have to work with. Right now, believe it or not, if the season started today, I think it would be Johnson and Lagadou Nani as the starters. And, these are 2 guys that would probably be 4 and 5 receivers on most other teams. So it's a pretty sad situation, I think, at receiver.
Well, they do have Devon Best there as well. So I'm going to be, we can go right into that with Brett Hartline, and of course they obviously signed Chad Johnson. He's not going to have a great deal of talent to throw to. He has a pretty solid tight end that's going to keep him safe in Anthony Fasano. But I agree with you. This is not a quarterbacking situation I'm going to get excited about. Even if Tannehill is the starting quarterback in Miami, he's going to go through growing pains. I think it was a great pick by Miami. Clearly they needed it. They have 2 solid veterans behind him. And right now he's having a fine camp. And the receivers out there seem to be happy with him. But the overall, decision has to be made is whether or not you're going to throw him out there into the the gunfire right away, or you're going to let him sit back and learn? I hope they do at least let him sit back for 3 or 4 games and let him, get some game time experience on the bench. I think that always helps rookie quarterbacks. I mean, you can't do that with the Andrew Lucks and the and the RG3s. You can't. They have to go out there. But I'm hoping the Dolphins will give him a few shots out there on the bench to at least learn play calling and just develop like that. Because I think you're right. I think he has incredible speed and accuracy and great arm, and he's going to be an effective fantasy quarterback. And he could do that later this year. But if they throw him out there, get him scared, get him a little shell shock, get him calling bad plays, get him confused by the defense, he's not going to be as effective as we would like him to be in year one. But you don't like any of those wide receivers? I mean, you don't think that Devon Best can still, produce at least in a PPR league, and you don't like Brian Harline as, again, to be able to produce, maybe not week to week, but have some big games this year?
I mean, Devon Best is fine, but, when you've basically got 2 new guys who have been inserted in front of them, and so that just adds, ambiguity to the whole situation. I think, in the absence of Johnson and then Nani, if they were just going to go with Hartline and Best and it was, more predictable that, at least these guys were, going to be the focus of the passing game, then, sure, then you take a chance on them. But when you really talk about this mess that you have to sort through to try to figure out who's going to be getting the ball, and plus, the huge question marks at quarterback, I don't think it's worth messing with. Yeah, there's one thing to maybe keep in mind with the passing game for the Dolphins is that, the new coach is Joe Philbin, and Philbin, of course, worked with the Packers, and he was, largely credited with putting Jermichael Finley on the map. So, that could be good news for Fasano. And the Dolphins also drafted a pretty talented guy in the 3rd round, I believe, Michael Ignew, who I think has the potential to be better than Fasano. Once he's just a rookie, he has to learn the game. But he definitely has more speed than Fasano. So I mean, once again, for keeper dynasty situation, if you're really desperate for a tight end to grab to stash away in your roster, I think Michael Ignew is not a bad choice.
All right, that's we'll go with that. I want to also get over to the running game real quickly before we wrap up with the Dolphins, and we'll also check out their defense too, because that might be actually playoff impact. But now you go over and you have Daniel Thomas from last year, RC. Daniel Thomas, a strong rookie, came on strong last year, but never really got a chance due to injuries and just due to the overall effectiveness that Reggie Bush had. He finished last year at the 581 yards, 0 touchdowns, not even, he had not even really a good average, 3.5 yards per carry. Going into this year, obviously Reggie Bush is coming back. Is this a running back battle that we're looking at now, or are they going to hand the ball to Reggie Bush, or is it going to be a kind of a running back by committee, similar to what they kind of did last year when Thomas was actually healthy?
Thomas was probably his own worst enemy last year, where he didn't make the most of the time that he got, and then he suffered from injury problems. But in all likelihood, Reggie Bush is proven not to be able to handle a full conventional, and really this is a trend that's pretty pervasive in the NFL anyway, where there are no real every down feature backs where you just keep them in for every play. So there's more or less some kind of timeshare going on in most teams, and the Dolphins should be no exception. So I think Reggie Bush is going to be the primary ball carrier till he proves that he can't do it. And then at that point, I really don't think the focus should be on Daniel Thomas. Daniel Thomas is a good complimentary guy. He's a big bruising back who should have a decent role. Certainly, if he was thrust into the starting job, I think he would do okay. He's like a 3 yards per carry, maybe like Sean Green type kind of player. But the guy behind him is actually more interesting, and that's another guy they drafted this year, Lamar Miller. Lamar Miller was graded as first-round talent by many scouts this year, and really, he's a guy that's got, really that size, speed combination that you like to see. Very, very nifty, actually, and he carries a good deal of bulk as well. I think that Reggie Bush, I'm not sure, certainly this year he's a guy you should focus on, but maybe the changing of the guard starts to happen this year where I think Lamar Miller eventually becomes the starter over in Miami.
You know what? I like that because, in a lot of, we saw it a lot last year where a lot of these, third-string running backs, particularly running backs that were drafted in 2011, actually made, and it's been happening the last actually couple of years, especially with these committees, are coming out of the woodworks and people think they have no fantasy value or very little fantasy value and normally are absolutely free agents in their leagues once the season starts. And these guys make big impacts. I mean, if you look at the Dolphins' running game right now, because I wanted you to bring up Lamar Miller. Obviously, you love the NFL draft. We should all love it, but it's like your baby. And granted, he was a fourth-round pick, but I've seen fine running backs, particularly fantasy potential running backs, come even later than that. And when you look at Daniel Thomas and you look at Reggie Bush, the first thing you say to yourself, I'm just going to stay away from both of them. Yes, is this a running offense? Yes, it's a running offense. But both those guys have a career of injuries, and and Daniel Thomas could absolutely produce this year and be an amazing running back, but he's in a system that's not going to be built around a focused one running back attack and with a great passing game to kind of cover that running game up a little bit. It's not going to happen this year. So what I see happen here is I see Reggie Bush going out there getting some carries, Daniel Thomas getting some carries, and for the most part, Lamar Miller sitting on the bench. But once one of those guys get hurt in RC, it will happen. Then you'll see a little bit more Lamar Miller. Now, once two of those guys get hurt, then you're going to see a lot of Lamar Miller. And it kind of beckons back to DeMarco Murray last year, which DeMarco Murray was barely drafted last year, but then after injury after injury taken to the Cowboys running game, here comes DeMarco Murray. He breaks out and it's great here. Now he was a different kind of player. He's not, I'm not going to say Lamar Miller's DeMarco Murray by any means, stretch of the mind. Granted he came out of Miami, not a bad school, but and goes plays for Miami. But the bottom line is that he very well in this team could have fantasy impact, so it's not a bad deep pick, especially if your fantasy league affords you a deep bench. All right, anything else you want to say about their offense or their defense? I mean, the defense, how did Miami, in your eyes, improve that defense, which was already okay last year from a fantasy standpoint? Is there anything to get excited about this year for it?
They re-signed Cameron Wake. I mean, that was a pretty good move. I would say, the defense is underrated. They got rid of Bell in the secondary. They have some youth that can replace him. Their cornerbacks I think are very, very solid. Vontae Davis and Sean Smith. So the defense isn't bad. I mean, it's not, obviously an elite unit compared to some of the other defense in the NFL, but it certainly is, I think, well above average. It's a pretty good defense.
No, it is, and it always has been. That's the great thing about what they do in Miami. They always produce a pretty good defense. The only problem is they have to play some pretty good offenses, even though they tend to do okay against those set offenses like, the Patriots. But that's where the danger lies. But I think they're going to be, like they were last year, a sneaky defense that's going to play very well at home, and then they're going to have some games where they can maybe make some things happen, like maybe against your Jets. It all depends on how your Jets perform. But overall, I think they're mid to lower tier of the top defenses. I mean, obviously there are certain defenses you just don't even go near. But out of the ones you would consider drafting, they're not too shabby, and they actually make a pretty good backup defense. They'll actually make it a pretty good backup defense. But we spent enough time on the Dolphins. We need to move on and get to the draft. Right before we get to the draft, RC, I need to make mention of the fantasy of our Blog Talk Radio League number 3. We have, I believe, 4 spots still available. It's the final league. We are not opening up another league, guys. So we got 4 spots left. I believe the draft is in the second or third week of, I think it's around the 22nd or something like that. Of you get join the league. It's somewhere in there. For the draft around 6 p.m. at Pacific time. But anyways, if you want to get in the league, email me at todd@fantasyfootballfetch.com, and I will get you into the league. Again, we have 4 spots out of 12 remaining, and we're going to close it up after that. And I know I have a couple of invites out there, so hurry up. All right, RC, let's get to this draft. Now, again, it was Fantasy Pros versus Joe's League. pretty standard snake draft. The first round to me interests me quite a bit because, it's telltale of what's going to be going on this year. You had the number 2 pick. Let's mention some of the other guys, some of the other experts that were in this draft really quickly. You have fantasyfreakingfootball.com. Fantasy Sharks, always a danger over there. Extrapointpress.com, ffspin.com, and I believe the other, is that all the experts that were in it? Did I miss any?
I get Fantasy Sharks. No, also Fantasy Mojo. I'm not sure what he calls himself, but Dumb and Dumber. He's a cool guy.
And then you have Brothers Mayhem. I see you have in this draft. That's one of our listeners, and he was also in some of our leagues last year. I don't know if he's in one of our leagues this year, though. Not sure. But he's also a very good player, so we'll see what he did. All right, so this draft opened up. You were at the number 2 pick. Obviously, you went with Arian Foster. Were you shocked that Ray Rice went number 1 and Arian Foster didn't, and he fell to you? How did you feel about those first 2 picks?
Honestly, I showed up about 3 minutes late, and that was a default pick for me. So I might have done myself a favor because I probably would have done something stupid like pick Aaron Rodgers with the number 2 pick, where I think Aaron Rodgers is really safe, but certainly you definitely want to go with a running back the first round if possible. I mean, I just hate having like those early picks and picking. It's like an obligatory 3 guys that are always at the top every year, and in a good year, 2 of the guys are going to perform like everyone expects. In a bad year, all 3 are going to be complete busts. So I really don't like picking the top 3 guys that are always the consensus. Arian Foster obviously is a pretty safe guy to pick, so I really can't complain about that.
Well, no, you can't complain. I mean, listen, this is what I've said all year, or so far all season. I mean, not all year, but, when you get one of those top picks, you kind of have to bite the bullet and take one of those top 3 running backs. Now, I don't think you have to take – I see Ryan Matthews was number 4, by the way. Obviously, LaShawn McCoy was number 3. By the way, was this a PPR league?
Yeah, but the slight wrinkle with this league is that tight ends are weighted a little bit more heavily. So what happens in this league all the time is that you'll see tight ends like come off the board pretty early. Like, for example, Vernon Davis went in round 4. Typically, that's not happening this year. Aaron Hernandez went in round 3. That's very early for him.
Okay, hold on. We're going a little far here. I just asked you, was it a PPR league?
Okay. The short answer is yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure because I was going to give a little bit. We'll get into the later rounds in a second, but let's focus on the top one because there were some interesting picks in this one. Like I said, Ryan Matt. I mean, you have to go one of those top 3. So I guess the question that I want to ask is, right after you got your Arian Foster, LaShawn McCoy went. Would you have taken LaShawn McCoy over Arian Foster if you had the option?
Yeah, I would. If I was there for the pick, it would have been either McCoy or Rodgers.
Well, let's ask people in the chat room if you guys want to put in some questions. We got lockdown in the chat room. And you remember what I said last week, I believe it was, maybe last week, 2 weeks ago? I said, I have fun in this league, but my only goal in the league is, of course, I want to win it. I just want to make sure I beat lockdown. One of the best smack talkers out of all of our listeners. And I'm sure I will. I did it last year. Tortured him all season. He was like, I think he was crying. I mean, I can't tell through the league, but I think he was crying. All right, so let us know what you guys think in the chat room. He's laughing. Who would you take? Would you take Arian Foster? Tell us. Me and RC are crazy. Let us know. Or you take the 60-plus catches you'll get from LaShawn McCoy and the Michael Vick run offense. But here was what got interesting is this is what I like, RC. 5th pick, and we're going to cover the first round in detail, and then we'll loosely cover the rest of the rounds. 5th pick was not Chris Johnson. He was 6th. 5th pick was Calvin Johnson. Now I think that's really one of the best picks in this first round. I mean, you can't complain with the 8th pick being with the Fantasy Sharks' Aaron Rodgers, but Calvin Johnson going number 5. Do you like that?
Yeah, that's really where he's been going this year. I mean, this year it's been pretty predictable. Ryan Matthews going before Calvin Johnson, and this is just really splitting hairs. I mean, the first round you're always going to really see basically, from year to year the same guys go. You can't argue with Calvin Johnson at 5. I mean, his ADP is right smack at 5. So, yeah, I expected that.
Yeah, I love that pick. You know me. I mean, if I had the 5th pick, would I have necessarily gone Calvin Johnson? Probably not. Would you have gone Aaron Rodgers at that pick instead of Calvin Johnson?
Yeah, you know why? I love Calvin Johnson, but I liked him a lot more in previous years where you were buying like the potential upside. 'Cause now everyone knows he's the new, basically Andre Johnson, right? I mean, Andre Johnson took a little while to get into a groove. He was young, learning the game, had some bad quarterbacks, and then when he emerged, I mean, he just exploded on the scene, and that's what's happened with Calvin Johnson. He's not a secret anymore. So if you're going to get him, you have to pay pretty dearly, and an early first round pick is paying pretty dearly. The thing with the receiver position is that there are a couple studly guys that are going to basically just have a value that you can't really duplicate with sleeper picks. But in general, I mean, wide receivers are going to be the deepest position any year. So what I tend to do is I like to really dig in and try to find those guys that are going to start to emerge. Sometimes rookies can work out. This year, like we mentioned, Golden Tate. I mean, he's a candidate to he's somewhat of a deep sleeper. I mean, he's not going till probably like the 18th round in your draft. But guys like that, that can perform not nearly like a Calvin Johnson, but if he can do just 3/4 of what a Calvin Johnson does, and you get them in the 18th round, I think you're doing a lot better. I think you're always better off going with, the running backs that are going to get the lion's share of the action on their respective teams. But I can't argue with Calvin Johnson. Certainly if he was hanging out there and I was picking number 10, I would grab him in a second.
I'll tell you this. I mean, first of all, you've got to one of these days admit your man crush for Golden Tate. You just got to. Let it out. Is he the new Eddie Royal? Is that what he is for you? He's like a bad relationship. You won't stop loving him, but you'll keep going back to him.
Well, you make it sound like I'm basically jumping ship on Eddie Royal. Eddie Royal is still the same Eddie Royal for me. There's no one can ever replace Eddie Royal. I mean, come on. Golden Tate is a whole different new situation. So you can give me grief about that all year, I guess.
Well, I can give you grief about that, but here's what I'll say about. I'm not going to give you too much grief because Golden Tate has a lot of potential, and he could very well still be a very good wide receiver, and we'll definitely see how that develops out there in Seattle. But here's the deal. Of course, we haven't even gotten to the Detroit receiver that we both like a lot, Titus Young. That's another Eddie Royal in the making. All right, well, but I agree. I would not take Calvin Johnson number 5. I would probably have taken Aaron Rodgers first. So I think, but I can't sit here and say it's a bad move. But you got to remember, in the first round, you've got to come out of the first round with a guy who's going to be your consistent point scorer, who's going to go out there game after game and give you good points. And that's why I like Aaron Rodgers in the first round, because even though I'm not high on him this year, and I'm just saying this from a personal level, I don't obviously think he's not going to put up amazing numbers, but I just kind of think he's due to get hurt, because it's like every quarterback has their time. Even Peyton Manning finally got hurt. It's like, I know, he was out one game last year, but that was mostly more of a sit-down game for him. And I just, it's like people are going to really be going after them. That they're going to be headhunting for him and not like in the Saints way. But it's like, hey, if we want to win this game, we've got to rattle, Aaron Rodgers, because if we don't, we're going to lose. So I hate taking guys who are like the primary absolute target for any team, particularly when they're a quarterback. So that being said, we've seen the running backs constantly get hurt. I mean, when it's your job to carry the ball and touch it 30+ times a game on a good day, you're going to get beat up and you're going to get hurt. And that's why I don't like getting a running back in the first round. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. You got to bite the bullet and take your guys if you have these picks. But when you get Calvin Johnson, who may only touch the ball 8 or 9 times, but get 2 touchdowns out of it and get 8, 9 catches out of it, hey, that's not a bad day, and that's what you're going to get out of Calvin Johnson. Or, of course, out of some of these other guys like Gronkowski, who I do not recommend taking in the first round, but he obviously went here. Or or Jimmy Graham also in the first round in this league. I don't recommend taking guys like that, or even Chris. I mean, look what happened with Chris Johnson last year. He was like a number 2 or 3 round draft pick last year, and he just stunk it up. And it wasn't even injury that he stunk it up to. It was just a poor team around him. That's why I try to steer clear, if I can, of running backs, if you can. And with the 5th pick, you certainly could steer clear. But I want to get to these 2 other picks, and we see Matt Forte at number 9, and then we'll get to 10. We'll get to 11 and 12 in a second. But after Aaron Rodgers, right before Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Graham went. And then right after Aaron Rodgers with Matt Forte, and then number 10 was Rob Gronkowski. Now, obviously, both Jimmy Graham and Ron Gronkowski are the 2 best tight ends in the league, and I think we both agree that Jimmy Graham would be the one we'd want out of those 2 this year. I think we talked about that last week. But are they number 1 draft pick material in your eyes? I mean, is this the year that we're going to start seeing Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski consistently go in the first round, or is this league just a little bit crazy right now to start?
Yeah, like I was mentioning, in this particular scoring system, tight ends are weighted a little bit more heavy. So even though Jimmy Graham and Gronkowski are going very early this year for tight ends, there's no doubt, but what you can expect is really, if you want to grab one of those guys, you're going to have to do it before the end of the second round. So right now the ADP on Jimmy Graham is 204, and Gronkowski is not far behind at 206. So if you want those guys, you're going to have to take them in the early second round.
You're right. They're pretty much going right now. I mean, at least in the ADP from Mock Draft Central, they're going mid to late second round. And that's what I figured. I mean, I figured, hey, you're going to get some late-round draft picks. But this is where I agree with you, just on a different player. I would let them go. I would not want to be the guy. Now, years ago, I championed taking tight ends in the 4th round. I said, hey, get your Jason Witten, your Dallas Clark, or am I saying his name right? I'm blanking here. I think I got it right. Okay, good. You get those guys in the 4th round. You get your premier tight ends. But now they're getting so much better that they're second-round material, and they certainly deserve to be taken in the second round. But I'd be the guy. I would just say, let somebody else take a tight end in the second round. I'm going to get a top-notch quarterback or a running back in the second round. But before we get to the second round, there's an interesting pick. First of all, the final pick of the first round was Jamal Charles. Fine pick. I have no disagreement with that. But Trent Richardson, the rookie, number 1 draft pick for the Cleveland Browns, goes in the 11th pick. Is he getting a little too much hype? I mean, I know he's dominating, and I know he can come out of the gates and just go berserk, but he is in Cleveland. Let's be factual here. He is in Cleveland, and when you're getting blown out 28-0 in the 3rd quarter, Trent Richardson's effectiveness is going to be diminished. Has Cleveland improved enough, first of all, to make him a super effective fantasy running back, particularly one that should be taken in the first round? And do you agree with that pick in the first place?
Yeah, I think, a similar thing happened last year with Mark Ingram, right? A lot of people took him. I think he was going in the second, early 3rd round, really around that area. Richardson, is obviously going. He is consistently going around the late 1st round, early 2nd round. Is he worth it? I think you bring up a good point about the team situation. Ingram was going to a better team situation, certainly. The Browns are committed to Richardson, there's no doubt, but they do have some competing guys there, like Hardesty's still there, Brandon Jackson they saw in the offseason. So these guys should be clearly backups, but you really never know how they're going to shuffle the running backs around. So even if Richardson comes out of the gate strong and he's going to be mixed into some kind of rotation, then he may not be worth a first-round selection. On talent alone, if he was put into, behind a team, let's say he went to the Patriots with a really good offensive line, I would say no doubt, because they don't have anyone that could touch a talent level of Richardson. He would be the guy. He's in a prolific offense with a great line. But you do bring up a valid point about the Brown situation. I mean, there's a lot to like about Richardson. Basically.
Let me bring it up. Let me bring it up this way. You have an unproven running back, right? I mean, so far in the NFL, he's absolutely unproven. Correct? Factually correct?
I'm sorry, what?
Is it factually correct that he's an unproven running back in the NFL?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and he's on a team that, in my opinion, is in somewhat disarray, but certainly is one of the worst franchises right now. I mean, not historically, but right now in 2012, they're going to be one of the worst teams unless they have some miracle improvement. They're likely going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they're also in a brutality of a division. I just wanted to make that clear: brutality of a division, defensive-wise. Even the Bengals are good defensively. So they're going to be facing the Steelers, the Ravens. They're going to be facing some. So this is a guy I would have avoided, and it's certainly in the first round. I even probably would have avoided him in the second round. Again, there's a risk versus reward. Can this guy have a tremendous season and go crazy like Peyton Hillis did? I mean, Peyton Hillis was he was a different kind of running back. You can't compare two guys, but can he do that with the Browns offense? Well, certainly he can. But does that make him a number one draft pick? And I just don't want to take that risk. And if somebody else wants to take that risk, and somebody else wants to take the risk of taking Jimmy Graham in the first round or even late second round, go right ahead and do that. I mean, just go right ahead. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the players that are equal to that, and guys who went right behind him. Let's just go ahead and shoot into the second round. I mean, obviously Jamal Charles. There's some risk with anytime a guy's coming off injury. You have risk, but you can't complain. I mean, how awesome Jamal Charles is. He should be fine this year. But then you go right after that, and now you see the second round. So I'll run through it really quickly. You have Darren McFadden going with the first pick, and then Tom Brady, Maurice Jones-Drew, Darren Sproles, DeMarco Murray, Andre Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Adrian, not the one formerly on the Bears. Drew Brees, Antonio Gates, Steven Jackson, and Wes Welker. Now, I see not a lot, but I see several picks in the second round that I would have taken over Trent Richardson. Who in this second round do you think should have gone late in that first round, if anybody?
Oh, not too many, actually. I mean, I would have taken DeMarco Murray and Larry Fitzgerald and maybe Drew Brees, maybe not. Just those two, probably, DeMarco Murray and Larry Fitzgerald, I would take in.
Now, what is your hate? Hold on. What is the hate this year that I'm seeing? And I see this ADP going, okay, and I see it. I visually see it. And I see Drew Brees falling later than expected when he should be right up there with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, obviously he should be picked after Aaron Rodgers. But he should be, I mean, if I was the guy who had the Trent Richardson pick, I would have taken the Drew Brees. I probably would have taken DeMarco Murray, probably. But even, I would probably have said no because I'm not a big running back guy in the first round. But Drew Brees is sitting there, and I know the Saints have their issues this year. But Drew Brees is an elite quarterback who just signed a huge contract, so he's going to be happy. He has Jimmy Graham. He has the number 7 pick he's throwing to. He has a trio of running backs running behind him that are going to certainly open up holes for his passing game. And then he has, obviously Marquez Colston and company. Why is Drew Brees falling deeper in these drafts than we expect?
Well, I mean, is he really falling that deep? His average selection is really still in the first round, so I don't think he's falling. Certainly, I am a little bit leery about touching him because not to question what he's accomplished and what he's expected to do this year, because certainly he can match what he did last season easily, despite I think the handicap this year, which is basically the team didn't sign Eddie Royal when they had the opportunity. No, that's not it. They basically have I think a big question mark in terms of being without their head coach, suspended. There's a whole cloud hanging over the organization. They lost Robert Meacham. Not that that's going to be like a significant change. Since they really didn't use him correctly anyway, in my opinion. but too much is in flux for the. If they had continuity going from what they accomplished last season and into this season, I would have no qualms about picking Drew Brees early. I think in the first round for Drew Brees, I think Tom Brady's going too high too. I think the only one worthy of going in the first round this year is Aaron Rodgers. Tom Brady and Drew Brees going this high, I think, is a little bit crazy.
I'll tell you this, man. I'm gonna, we're about to settle a bet or something because I'm getting angry. I mean, just looking at Drew Brees' numbers last year, let's just peek at them, but don't look at them too long because it's going to blow your mind. 5,476 yards, 46 touchdowns. I believe that was the record. Yeah, I believe he broke Dan Marino's record for yards in a year. 46 touchdowns. Now, that's pretty good. That right there, if you go and you get this guy, even if he only throws 36 touchdowns and 4,900 yards, to me, that's a stable quarterback. That's a quarterback that's going to throw, on average, 2-point-something touchdowns per game. If you virtually eliminate the last game of the season in the playoffs, during the regular part of the season, which is normally 13 games long, you're almost at 3 touchdowns per game. That's what you want to get out of the first round, RC. You want to get a guy who I don't care what the point system is, 25 points per yard, 6 points per touchdown, whatever. That's the standard. You're going to get 20-plus points out of Drew Brees every game. And you know what? He stays healthy. He's got a great offensive line. He still has Lance Moore. He still has Marquez Colston. They still have Devery Henderson. I mean, they still have Darren Sproles, who's going to be catching a lot of balls out of the backfield, along with the pounding game. And then, of course, he has, Jimmy Graham, we've mentioned multiple times in the show already. I would not have passed up on him, and I would have said if I had that last pick in the first round, which by the way he followed up. Let's follow. What was a Trent Richardson pick? He followed up his next pick with Tom Brady. Excellent move, by the way. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm just sorry. I mean, if I was him, I would have gotten. If he could have gotten Drew Brees and Trent Richardson, he would have had obviously a mighty quarterback, and then he could take that risk with Trent Richardson because he basically got a number 1 draft pick in the second round. But moving on to Tom Brady, I have questions about Tom Brady. I think you do too. So why don't you give your reason why you think Tom Brady went too high with the second overall pick in round 2? And if you want to bash me on, and by the way, if there's a bet you want to make with Drew Brees against one of those number 1 draft picks, against any of the number 1 draft picks that I don't like, let me know and I'll play the music.
Okay. It's not really a question. Certainly all the pieces are in place for Tom Brady to do better than he did last year. Adding Brandon Lloyd is a good thing. The emergence of Gronkowski, obviously what an emergence that was, record-breaking emergence. A potentially a full season from Aaron Hernandez. I'm not sure they improved the running game, so that actually works, in the favor of Brady as well. Really the issue for me is not Tom Brady is certainly one of the safest commodities, that you can come away with in the first or second round. I just think it's really an issue of the replacement value, because I really think that there's a number of quarterbacks that could perform, close enough to Tom Brady that you can get 2-3 rounds later. For example, Matthew Stafford, you can get him probably 2 rounds later. Eli Manning, for example. Eli Manning you can probably get in the 7th or 8th round. Is he going to be that appreciably different from what Tom Brady does? They have some pretty damn good receivers on the Giants, and they've really transformed into a passing team. How much difference is there between Tom Brady and Eli Manning? Not in a pure football standpoint, because Eli Manning can be a real bonehead, and we've never seen Tom Brady make that many mistakes. But from a pure numbers standpoint, for fantasy purposes, is there really that much? Is there 6 rounds of difference between Tom Brady and Eli Manning?
You know what? I'm not going to sit here and say that there is, because there isn't. I mean, Tom Brady, you pretty much know what you're going to get. He's been pretty consistent the last, I would say 2 or 3 years. I mean, obviously, in 2010, he did underperform a little bit, I believe, touchdown-wise, a tad, but yard-wise, certainly, I don't even think he broke 4,000 yards. But last year, he put him back up again. He put up the yards. They didn't have the drama they had from 2 years ago, and he put up plus 5,000 plus yards and 39 touchdowns. Now, is there a big difference? No, you're absolutely right, and I agree with that because now they're changing the dynamic of that team. I mean, you have Wes Welker aging a little bit, being concerned of where he's going to be in that, what roles is he going to be in that offense. You got Brandon Lloyd coming in. I mean, Brandon Lloyd's, I think he's a fine receiver, but how is he going to mix with Tom Brady? And obviously, you have. I think what's going to become a little bit of a controversy is between what are they going to do with Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. I mean, Aaron Hernandez certainly is probably the more talented, of the two guys. Certainly, what kind of plays he can go out on. But Gronkowski's, he's the bomb. So there's going to be. I think there's going to be some issues with that offense, and then you have the whole running game mess, which is just always a mess for the Patriots, anyways. And and just the whole fact that the whole team is it's another year older. What's going to happen? So I would definitely say, stay away from Tom Brady. Let somebody else get the 5,000 yards and 37 touchdowns he may throw. And you're right, go get an Eli Manning much later or a Tony Romo. And by the way, Matthew Stafford is going to be an absolute gem this year. I mean, we haven't had a chance to talk about him, but I'll tell you right now, if I don't have a shot at getting an Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees, I would certainly go with the Matthew Stafford, a little bit later in the draft, and steal him from somebody while I get a lot of early players. So I agree with you. So again, I guess what I'm kind of saying here with this, I don't mean to pick on what's his name, Shaden Freud, whatever his name is, but so far I think he hasn't done very well in this draft. We'll see how it shapes up. Him going with Trent Richardson and Tom Brady, and that might be crazy talk, but I think he could have done a little bit better. I think the guy who got away with getting Drew Brees, which is fantasy freaking football, and he got Ryan Matthews with the 4th overall pick, is looking much better. Obviously, he had the 4th pick, so we got to be a little fair. Let's see how the rest of this draft goes. Moving to the 3rd round, we only got about 13 minutes left in the show, so let's kind of move quickly. In the 3rd round, we had Jennings, Newton, Cam Newton. There's another quarterback that you can get a little bit later who's going to perform, and you got him. And by the way, in the 2nd round, you got Steven Jackson, but there's not a lot of talk about that. But I do want you to talk a little bit about Cam Newton, and I also want you to talk about the pick that went a couple picks after you, Aaron Hernandez. And then I'll talk about a couple other guys that win this draft. But were you happy with getting Cam Newton round 3? Was that part of your big plan?
I just figured that I wanted to come away with, one of those quarterbacks that could basically, if the passing game is shut down, first of all, they're in a really easy division, so that benefits Cam Newton. I don't like his receivers, but it just seems Cam Newton last year, he really didn't, obviously going into the season as a rookie should have been a limitation. It served no resistance whatsoever. He just was, basically a beast from the moment the season opened. I love the fact that he can create on his own because, for a situation like Carolina, he has to. Running quarterbacks are a valuable commodity, and he's not blistering fast, but he's such an imposing player where he'll just run you over, and I just love to see that in the quarterback. So to pick up the extra points that you can get with rushing yards, I think is a huge plus for Cam Newton.
Absolutely. I mean, Cam Newton is one of those quarterbacks that he's fantasy gold because he doesn't need a great team around him to be great, and he proved that in his rookie year. In the year where he's supposed to be not good, the guy throws for 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, but runs for 700 yards and 14 touchdowns. He's an absolute gem. To get him in the 3rd round is amazing. Not amazing, but I mean that's right around where he's going. So it's a great pickup for somebody who didn't get a quarterback, and you get Arian Foster, so you're set at running. Your running game is absolutely set for the early part of the draft. Then you turn around and you get Steven Jackson, so it's really set. So now you can focus on another position, and you go out and you get one of the best available picks. One of the picks I want to talk about really quickly before we talk about Aaron Hernandez in this one, so I'll take my shot, was A.J. Green going with the 8th pick to Fantasy Sharks. If you want me to tell you somebody right now who I think is absolutely dominant in this draft, I mean, I'm not going to give a draft grade. I'm not going to sit here and say who's best, who's worse. I have to look at the whole draft. But going through round 3, I am loving Fantasy Sharks, and I'm, I know those guys well over there. They are FantasySharks.com. Check them out. They're very good at what they do. But look at his team so far. This is a guy that's drafting how I would like to draft. Certainly, where he went first round with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, gold. I mean, really, in the first round, except for Trent Richardson, it was all gold. Then he goes second round, and he gets DeMarco Murray, who I think is a first-round draft pick. I mean, I know he has injury issues, but I think he's a first-round draft pick. And then he turns around and gets one of the more exciting, emerging wide receivers in the league. Now, are you going to disagree with me that A.J. Green is not going to, assuming, obviously, got to assume health when we're doing all of our projections here, but is he not going to be a top-notch wide receiver and one of the top wide receivers when it comes to the end of the season in the league?
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, it's really great to see how A.J. Green and Julio Jones, who maybe, both these guys, they're a little bit different in terms of A.J. Green is, more of a polished route runner, definitely can, create his own space. He's an aggressive receiver, where Julio Jones is, brings really that vertical dimension to the game, and I really think the sky is the limit for him. I like Julio Jones' situation better. By the way, I'm only mentioning him because he went 2 picks later, and they're really so similar because they're second-year players. I think Julio Jones with the Falcons. I like Matt Ryan better than Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's a little bit weak-armed. But to your point, for A.J. Green to come into the league and accomplish what he did in such a short time in that situation with a rookie quarterback, just really, I think, underscores the kind of talent that he is. So, yeah, he's definitely, without question, I think one of the safer receivers you can pick this year and well worth a third-round pick.
And absolutely, I agree with you about Julio Jones. I'm definitely on the Julio Jones bandwagon, and especially with Roddy White, who was taken. I should have gone down this list. It was the round 3 was Greg Jennings, Cam Newton, Fred Jackson, Aaron Hernandez, Roddy White, Ahmad Bradshaw, Marshawn Lynch, A.J. Green, Jason Witten, Julio Jones, and then Doug Martin and Akeem Nicks. So, I mean, you really saw a lot of wide receivers come off the board. And to what I think is, it's justified where some of these guys went. I mean, some of these guys could have slipped into the second round, above guys like maybe, Steven Jackson and Wes Welker and Antonio Gates, and just above some guys that could have fallen to the early third round. Not saying fallen very far, but when you reflect back on this draft, when you reflect back on your whole team, would you have rather have taken one of those sneaky little wide receivers instead of Steven Jackson in the late second round? I mean, would you have made a change? I mean, you had 2 quick picks there. You had the 11th pick of the second round, and then immediately came to the second pick of the third round. Would you have done things differently looking back at it, or are you still pretty stoked about the Steven Jackson, Cam Newton comp? Which, by the way, I love the Cam Newton pick. Obviously, as you're sensing, I'm not crazy about the Steven Jackson pick, but would you have still done that?
No, I mean, you bring up a good point. I would have been very happy with grabbing Julio Jones. As a matter of fact, I considered it instead of Steven Jackson, but I wanted to, make sure, that I solidified my running backs. Because one problem I had in this format last year, being that, it's not a situation where you can go in and replenish, and running backs get hurt, as you know, pretty often. So I wanted to make sure I got a couple, durable guys who were going to, be every down players. And with receivers, like I was saying before, I really think, as great as A.J. Green is and Julio Jones, as great as those guys are, I really think, for example, in the 6th round, I came away with Dwayne Bowe, who, I like Julio Jones better, but for 3 rounds later to get him, and by the way, he's holding out right now without seemingly a purpose because they put a franchise tag on him, and he can really gain nothing from holding out, but he's just doing it out of principle. But anyway, if he's on your team, you shouldn't worry too much because, it's almost a certainty that he's coming back. But the point being is that, when I can come away with a guy like that 3 rounds later and still get a premier running back, that was just my preference. But I can't argue with you. I would have been very happy with Green or Jones at that spot.
No, I can't disagree with you either there. I mean, they're obviously I don't because I don't know what to say, but I mean, they could have gone earlier, and I think sometimes when you get into drafts like this, the reason I bring it up is because when you get into drafts like this, and especially one where you have professional fantasy footballers versus guys who are very, very good. I mean, I'm sure none of these guys aren't really professional themselves. I mean, when we play in these BTR leagues, we get our butts whooped sometimes more than you do. I'm just kidding. We all do. And I mean, we've had several of them, and I've won one of them, and I think you won one of them. So it's just like we've had at least 2 every year for the past 3 years. So these guys can be good, but sometimes what happens is, I'm going to say this lightly. I don't mean this to be at all insulting, but sometimes common sense gets thrown out the door, where hype overwhelms common sense, and that's what I think. And I could be dead wrong. I mean, I could be week 8. I could be saying, "Oh my God, look how awesome Trent Richardson is." But when you're drafting and you have to build a team around a player and you're taking that number 1, number 2, number 3, really the first 4 picks, really build the core of your team. And then after that, you got to make some good little plucks out of the rest of the draft. But when you have those first 3, even 3 picks if you want to leave it at, 3 to 4 picks, you've got to build the core of your team right there. These are going to be the guys who are going to be the killers for me. And when I look at some of these teams, I'm going, I don't know. Your team's fine. I mean, Steven Jackson, he went to Rancho High School down here in Las Vegas. I'm never going to say a bad thing about him. Is he getting a little older? Is he not? Is he on a team that's kind of in a growth phase, kind of a team that's kind of, it's a Rams. Are they going to be good? Are they not going to be good? We don't really know. What I do know is that Steven Jackson's going to carry the ball and get his yards. I have no issue with that. But when I look at some of these teams, I go, you guys are taking risks. Like taking, for example, in the second round, going with Antonio Gates, Joe Boder. I mean, Antonio Gates has been fading. He's been hurt, and granted, he's still a fine tight end on a fine team. There were better picks. I mean, would you rather have Antonio Gates or A.J. Green right now on your team? There's a gun to your head. You got to pick one of them. Who do you take, RC?
That's a bad example because I wouldn't touch Antonio Gates unless he fell to like the probably 7th round this year. And not that, you can't take away his credentials and his accomplishments, and it's just like it's hard to trust him, especially, at another year older. And, word is that he's looking really good, and I believe it, and he's in a good situation with a great quarterback throwing to him. But he's also got a young tight end who looks very talented pushing him, and, Ladarius Green might see the field earlier than anyone thinks. And I'm just not that high on him. In this scoring format, once again, tight ends are weighted a little bit heavier than normal, but I thought that was way too early for Antonio Gates.
Now, I agree. And so we're gonna go a few minutes over because I want to cover at least round 4, and then we'll continue next week into round 5, 6, and because this is a great draft. I mean, it's not great that it's an amazing draft, but it's got great picks and some bad picks, and you got to have the bad picks and the bad decisions to be able to rightfully analyze a draft for our listeners, who because they want to know good and bad. The end of round 3, FantasyFootballSpin.com took Hakeem Nicks. This is one of the pros. Great pick. I have no issue with that. Hakeem Nicks is a stud wide receiver. Was a little hurt last year, but nonetheless, no argument there. Where I have an argument with FantasyFootballSpin.com is his 4th round pick that he followed with because he had the wheel pick. Takes Victor Cruz. Now again, Victor Cruz in the 4th round, great pick, right? But you can't take, especially in round 3 and 4, the same guys in the same team at the same position. Am I nuts? Tell me I'm nuts, RC, if you want to say it. You can be honest. You've been honest with me for 7, 8 years now. Am I nuts? Would you have made that same decision right there?
To take Hicks and Cruz?
Yeah.
I don't think it's really that crazy. For one thing, you've got, not that handcuffs are as important with receivers as they are with running backs, but you know that if anything happens to one of these guys, you're going to get the primary player in the prolific passing game. So there's nothing wrong with that. Both guys are certainly worthy of a very high draft pick this year. They played incredible last year, especially Victor Cruz. I really can't find too much fault with that, because when you look at the only guy that was picked afterwards that I might have picked instead of Cruz is maybe Jordy Nelson.
I love that.
Yeah, so maybe to kind of diversify in case, the Giants, do something stupid and, their offense shuts down. You diversify a little bit, you get a piece of, another really good passing game. But I can't find too much fault with that. I mean, I love both Nix and Cruz, and to have them both, I think it's a pretty good asset.
Hey, you remember last year when I got that nasty email because me and you were talking of Victor Cruz when he came in to replace, I guess it was Manningham or something. He came in as an injury fill-in early in the year, and then we got hammered. I read that email on the air because I thought it was insane. Yeah, I mean, that guy shut down, by the way. I never heard from him again after that. I like Victor Cruz and Hakeem Nicks. Now, just to be fair to Fantasy Football Spin, I'm not picking on his whole draft because he was the one who took Jamal Charles and then Darren McFadden in the first two rounds. Now, I'm looking at those two picks, and I'm like, wow, you took a guy who's coming off of a torn ligament and another guy who's great but injury-prone. So there's a lot of risk there. You have a lot of risk in your first two picks of building your team around, and then you go and you take two fine wide receivers in the same team. I mean, what if Eli Manning gets hurt? It happens. It happens every year in NFL football where quarterbacks go down for 6 to 8 games. Well, what happens when you don't have Eli Manning thrown to both those guys? And then you have Jordy Nelson, who is really one of the more unsung heroes of fantasy football, because he can come out and he can put up a monster year this year with Aaron Rodgers. He did it last year, but he can be even more prolific this year. A lot of people are saying he's the number one guy on the this year with with Greg Jennings aging a little bit, that Jordy Nelson could be the top performing receiver for the Packers. Now, I'm not going to go there yet, but he's definitely going to compete. So looking at that, there's also had Miles Austin go after him, but the guy that I liked in this round is he had Matthew Stafford sitting out there. And you have two running backs, and you got a good wide receiver. Why not lock up that top-notch quarterback? And if you didn't want him, why not, like you say, diversify and go with a Jordy Nelson or even a Miles Austin? I know Miles Austin had an off year last year, but the whole Dallas Cowboy team did. So why not go with a Miles Austin? And there was nobody else really exciting in that first round that I would have taken a chance on, that fourth round. But I have to say, that was, is he a Giants fan? Do you know the guy? What's his name? The guy who drafted for Fantasy Football Spin?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay, but whatever. Maybe he's a big Giants fan, but I just think, that early. And the thing is, I like your handcuffing point. Great to handcuff, but you don't want to handcuff in the third or fourth round. You want to get, Miles Austin and this is a terrible example in the fourth round, and then you want to get like Kevin Ogletree or whatever, whoever ends up being the backup, behind him for the Cowboys when the preseason ends. You want to get him later, like in the 8th or 9th round. You don't want to take a handcuff round after round because, again, Eli Manning's not going to throw 3 or 4 touchdowns every game, and he's not going to throw them to both those guys. He has a lot of other targets, so he might throw 2 to Victor Cruz one game and none to Hakeem that game, and then vice versa the next week. And if you go look at the stats from last year, that's kind of what happened most of the season. So it just can be dangerous. But anyways, I wanted to talk about, we'll wrap up with your pick in the 4th round, and then you can talk about any other picks you like there. But you took Jeremy Maclin. When I said I didn't like any other picks in the 4th round, that was as opposed to Victor Cruz. I love Jeremy Maclin, though. And I think you really solidified your wide receiver core, obviously, to start, because you hadn't had one yet. But getting Jeremy Maclin after you didn't take one the first 3 rounds, great pick. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I just think Maclin, same thing going into last year. I think he was underrated. Of course, he had that mystery illness, and that kind of slowed him down a bit. But, once he got back into game shape, he pretty much performed the way that you would expect a I really think he's, a borderline elite receiver. He's, not as big as you'd like. I mean, he's only about, 6 foot, but he's very smooth, blistering fast when he wants to go into second gear. Good hands, knows where to be. He definitely emerged as, the primary receiver for the Eagles without question last year when, Deshaun Jackson pretty much pulled the disappearing act. So, fourth round for Macklin. I mean, I'm very happy with that. I can see him performing, as well as AJ Green, who went around earlier. So I mean that's how I view Macklin.
Absolutely, I think Macklin could be the number one wide receiver without a doubt if everybody performs well and Michael Vick has a fine season in Philadelphia. I think Macklin could be the number one wide receiver there. No doubt, and he's already kind of developing into that. And the rest of the picks in this round, of course, were Victor Cruz started off, Brandon Marshall, Steve Smith, the Carolina version, Vernon Davis, fine pick there, Jordy Nelson, Miles Austin, great picks, Jermichael Finley. I still love Jermichael Finley. He had a bad year last year because, he had some injuries and all that, but still great. Then Matthew Stafford for Chimeras, which was a great steal. You had Eric Decker out of Denver. I think that's an exciting pick. It's a chancy pick, but it's an exciting pick with Peyton Manning being there. Fred Davis out of Washington, Jeremy Macklin, and then Percy Harvin. So we started seeing the tight ends go off the board where they naturally tend to go off the board. But these weren't the big name ones that we're always used to seeing, like with Fred Davis out there, but obviously well deserved. And but we'll go ahead and get into round 5 next week and see how that all develops. Anything else you want to say about this round 4? I mean, did you? I do want to ask you about the tight ends. Let's just talk about that really quickly. You saw basically 3 tight ends go off the board here. Vernon Davis, Jermichael Finley. There's not a lot to say about that, but are people reaching for Fred Davis this year, or is he going to be just the absolute perfect protection for RG3?
No, I mean, I think every time he's been basically placed in an important situation, he's come up, basically very capable. And, he's a pretty decent talent. Once again, the scoring system is a little bit weird, so tight ends are going to be, viewed probably with a little more prominence than they should be. Him going after Finley and Vernon Davis is about right. Let's see who went. Then Pettigrew. I would definitely rate him over Pettigrew. And who's like the next tight end that went after him. Then after that, I think you kind of drop off a little bit of a cliff. If you look at actually the ADP for tight ends, let's see what's going. It's Graham, Gronkowski, Hernandez, Gates, Davis, Finley. Where did Witten go? Did Witten go early? Yeah, Witten went before. Fred Davis is really the guy that comes, he's the number 8 tight end, so this pretty much went according to form. And the thing about, if you don't get one of those guys, Graham, Gronkowski, Hernandez, Gates, Davis, Finley, Witten, or Davis, Pettigrew is the next guy, and I think there's a drop-off between Davis and Pettigrew. Then after that, the aging Tony Gonzalez, we're not really sure how much is left in the tank for him. Then after him, Jacob Tam, who is in a new situation, not a bad situation over in Denver, but we're not exactly sure what's going to happen there. Then it's Grissom, Selleck, Gerard Cook, who actually is one of my favorite sleepers. But you can see how, after Davis, it drops off, so you can't argue with reaching a little bit for him.
So you think that Pettigrew is going to do slightly worse or Davis is going to do better than Pettigrew this year?
I do.
Season end.
I like Pettigrew. Pettigrew is, like an old school tight end where he's like a, mini tank, Basically, he's a, very consistent force, within 7 to 10 yards. I don't find that real exciting, but he's a great safety valve. He's not going to run away from anybody. You're not going to see, like Aaron Hernandez, kind of like shifty moves and running for like another 30 yards out of Brandon Pettigrew. It's just not going to happen. So I think, certainly worthy of, that middle tier, but he's never going to be an elite tight end, I don't think.
Are we talking about a wager, Randall?
How much you want to bet?
The usual amount?
So we got our first bet of the year, Brandon Pettigrew versus Fred Davis. We'll see how that one goes. I got a feeling I'm going to beat you this year. You know I'm pretty high on Brandon Pettigrew, but they are tight. It's going to be a tight race. We'll see how that one goes. Really quick, I did have an email question. It's a real easy one, so we'll answer it before we go. And I'll give it to you first. I've already answered for him in the email, but he has a choice for a keeper league. It's a keeper league, and this is from John Ryder. I have a choice between Marshawn Lynch and Rob Gronkowski. Who should I keep? RC, who would you tell him to keep?
Oh, gee, definitely Gronkowski. I mean, without question. And realizing I think the incremental value that usually the running back should represent. I think with Lynch, there's no taking away what he did last year, but it seems to me like it was a little bit of a fluke. I mean, when you look at Lynch's career, it's been very, very up and down. He's just not a guy that you can depend on. And not to mention his off the field adventures. He definitely has a stupid streak in him. Gronkowski, the top-rated tight end this year. I don't think he's going to really surpass what he did this year. Maybe not even. I really think Hernandez and Gronkowski are going to. If Hernandez can stay healthy, they're going to be kind of equal partners. So I wouldn't expect the same thing that you saw from him last year. But at this point, he's just more valuable. And over in Seattle, remember, Pete Carroll is a little bit unpredictable. So whatever way the wind's blowing, he could make a decision to go a different direction, platoon situation. They drafted a pretty good-looking running back named Robert Turbin. And Turbin looks like the same kind of guy that Marshawn Lynch is, maybe a little bit better, certainly a little younger. So it's not like Lynch's job is really that safe, and certainly he makes it more difficult for himself with his stupidity. So definitely Gronkowski.
Yeah, I agree. I gave him the answer of Gronkowski without a doubt. I mean, Marshawn Lynch is going to have the legal problems. That's obviously going to get in the way, and he's possibly, most likely, going to be facing a 1 or 2 game suspension, so no doubt on that one. It's just, I mean, if Marshawn Lynch didn't have the legal problems, I might have leaned towards Lynch, but it's just too much of a distraction. All right, RC, that was another great show. We will pick up the show next week at round 5 of this great draft. This is a great draft, RC. Thanks for doing it, and thank you for another great show.
All right, man. Have a good night.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather. Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Oh, welcome everybody to Fantasy Football Tonight. I'm your host, Todd the True Guru Farino, and of course I will be joined shortly by my co-host, Mr. RC Rizza. I will get the chat room open also for you people in the chat room land. Forgot about that, so I'm going to get that going right now. Also, before we get the show going, I want to give a shout-out to, of course, FantasyFootballFetch.com, one of my sites. I'd like you guys to go visit it, please, if you get a chance to. And, of course, check out the great content we have on it, along with rate your favorite sites. Let the people out there know about a service you use on a site. Hey, if it's good or bad, let them know. Leave a review about it. We give 3 weekly prizes away, or excuse me, monthly. My bad. 3 $50 monthly prizes away for if you leave 1 review, you go into the canister. If you win, you win. Check it out. Tonight's show, we were planning on doing a focus on NFL teams. We are going to finish the AFC East. We're going to start off with the Dolphins. We're going to open the show up as soon as RC gets in here. with the AFC East. And then we're going to plan on going into the NFC East, but we might hold that off because RC had a expert draft this weekend, and it's pretty impressive the way it went. So we're going to check it out. It's actually it's Fantasy Football Pros versus the Joes League. So you got some regular people in there, and then you have some of the expert guys in there, hands on it all, getting it done for you. So let me go ahead. Give me one sec here. All right, we got everything going. All right, so if you haven't heard, we got some news. There's training camps, of course, wide open. Everything's getting going. And as I told you last week, I said, don't put a whole lot of, don't put a whole lot into the current ADP. I mean, when we're giving you analysis at the time, we're giving you the analysis for what we know it for. The ADP may change, may not change, but the whole point is that once training camp opens, once you start seeing some of these rookies perform, once you start seeing some of these veterans perform, certainly, and especially once we get into the preseason games, which we should be getting into pretty soon here, you're going to see things kind of develop, things kind of change, and it's certainly going to change ADP. Now, it might not change. Played in that kind of a league. I mean, I played in that kind of a league baseball-wise, but never football-wise. So, but let's get into that a little bit more in a second. Let's go ahead and finish off with the Dolphins from last week, so we can say and this should be a pretty easy one because there's not a whole lot to talk about on the Dolphins. And then we're going to get right into your draft. And I see you had, by the way, just let people know ahead of time, you had the number 2 draft pick, which is, in my opinion, I guess an okay pick, but I mean, you got a long wait. So we'll see what you did with the second round. We got a feeling what you did with the first round. But anyway, so let's go ahead and let's finish off the eighth. We promised everybody. We know we have lots of Dolphin fans out there, RC. Millions of Dolphin fans. They cover the country. We would upset every single one of them if we didn't cover the Dolphins. So we're going to keep our promise and cover the Dolphins in the mighty offense led by Matt Moore, with David Garrard, of course, in there, and all sorts of great rookies that they have. So let's go ahead and start off at the quarterback spot. Is there a quarterback controversy in Miami right now?
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got basically a three-way competition between Gerard, Matt Moore, and Ryan Tannehill. And right now, it looks like David Gerard has the early nod, and that's mostly because of he's just a marginally better talent than perhaps Matt Moore. And of course, both these guys have a lot more experience than Ryan Tannehill. I would tend to think that Ryan Tannehill is actually a pretty good pro prospect. At the quarterback position, it's going to take a little time to actually learn the ropes, but I think he's going to at some point emerge as the choice there. David Gerard, as we've seen, I think he had some pretty bright years with the Jaguars but he really didn't ascend past the point, for what he is, and that's really just an average guy who can manage a game. He's not going to do anything special. He in his younger years, I think he had fairly good scrambling ability, but and maybe it's unfair because he didn't have great teams to work with really, but I really can't. He might start off the season as far as fantasy.
And Anthony Fasano. But I agree with you. This is not a quarterbacking situation I'm going to get excited about. Even if Tannehill is the starting quarterback in Miami, he's going to go through growing pains. I mean, it's I think it was a great pick by Miami. Clearly, they needed it. They have 2 solid veterans behind him. And right now he's having a fine camp. And the receivers out there seem to be happy with him. But the overall, decision has to be made is whether or not you're going to throw him out there into the gunfire right away, or you're going to let him sit back and learn. I hope they do at least let him sit back for 3 or 4 games and let him, get some game time experience on the bench. I think that always helps rookie quarterbacks. I mean, you can't do that with the Andrew Lucks and and the RG3s. You can't. They have to go out there. But I'm hoping the Dolphins will give him a few shots out there on the bench to at least learn play calling and just develop like that. Because I think you're right. I think he has incredible speed and accuracy and great arm, and he's going to be an effective fantasy quarterback. And he could do that later this year. But if they throw him out there, get him scared, get him a little shell shock, get him calling bad plays, get him confused by the defense, he's not going to be as effective as we would like him to be in year one. But you don't like any of those wide receivers? I mean, you don't think that Devon Best can still, produce at least in a PPR league, and you don't like Brian Hartline as, again, to be able to produce, maybe not week to week, but have some big games this year?
I mean, Devon Best is fine, but when you've basically got two new guys who have been inserted in front of them, and so that just adds like ambiguity to the whole situation. I think in the absence of Johnson and then Nani, if they were just going to go with Hartline and Best, and it was like more predictable that at least these guys were they're going to be the focus of the passing game, then sure, then you take a chance on them. But when you really talk about this mess that you have to sort through to try to figure out who's going to be getting the ball, and plus, the huge question marks at quarterback, I don't think it's worth messing with. Yeah, there's one thing to maybe keep in mind with the passing game for the Dolphins is that, the new coach is Joe Philbin, and Philbin, of course...
At the very top. I'm not going to say it's going to change the very top. I mean, as expected and as always, you're going to see, basically the first three guys in every draft are going to be Ray Rice, Arian Foster, LaShawn McCoy. And depending on your league type and your rules and all that great information, it's going to depend on whether or not it's going to actually be one of those, which one it's going to be. My opinion, it should be Ray Rice. Others' opinions, it should be Arian Foster. I don't think anybody believes they should go with LaShawn McCoy first, but who knows? But anyways, we'll get more into that talk. Let me go ahead and see if we got RC. We do have RC, so we can go ahead and get the show started. How are you doing, RC?
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, nothing but the rent. Just getting, trying to get out of baseball. I tried to phase myself out of baseball, but then, the Red Sox go out and have a good week, so then I got to start paying attention to them again. So, but so far, so good. I'm pretty much getting out of it. But, we got this draft you had. So before we get into our final NFL team, and we're going to go into some draft talk, why don't you give them a little teaser? This draft was it was a pros versus Joes style draft, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it looks like you ended up with a pretty good team. Are you pretty happy with your team?
Yeah, but then again, I've done this for a couple of years, and every year I'm happy with my team, and it's one of those leagues where you can't touch the team after you draft them. So if you screw up on the rookies that you pick, then like last year. And I'm usually like a year early with rookies. Like last year I picked John Baldwin. Of course, he was just basically dead weight the entire season, of course, because he didn't do much of anything. I think I had Golden Tate, and of course he didn't do anything. So got Golden Tate again this year, so I'm happy about that. I think he's actually going to actually make some waves. But yeah, have you ever been in one of those leagues where you can't mess with the roster after you draft it? So it's just kind of frozen from that time that you draft.
No, I've never actually.
If you want to take a chance with him as your number 3 quarterback, that's fine. I don't think he's really being drafted with really that much frequency this year. Maybe for 2 quarterback leagues, he becomes viable, but really the guy that you want to, at the quarterback position for the Dolphins to focus on, and this is really just for dynasty leagues, is Tannehill, I think.
So for this year, though, who do you like the best right now, at least for this year?
Even this year, if I had to pick one of these guys, it'd be Tannehill. I think, this is a guy, he's actually a converted wide receiver, so he's very mobile. He's actually, he throws pretty good on the run. He has a very good arm strength. He can make, all the throws he needs to. He's pretty advanced at reading defenses. That's, of course, one area for a young quarterback where, he's going to need a little more seasoning. But, he really does seem like a very good pro prospect. I really think it's a matter of time before he's the guy that will ascend to the top. Now, even if he does, this is really a situation where you probably just want to steer clear of anyway, because when you look at the wide receiver assortment they got there, notwithstanding the talk that Chad Johnson is, experiencing a resurgence and he's, really focused this year and he's playing hard, he might look actually pretty good when you compare him against, this motley crew that the Dolphins really have to work with. Right now, believe it or not, if the season started today, I think it would be Johnson and Lagadou Nani as the starters. And, these are two guys that will probably be 4 and 5 receivers on most other teams. So it's a pretty sad situation, I think, at receiver.
Well, they do have Devon Best there as well. So I mean, I'm going to be honest. We can go right into that with Brett Hartline, and of course, they obviously signed Chad Johnson. I mean, he's not going to have a great deal of talent to throw to. He has a pretty solid tight end that's going to keep him safe.